um, we left off after Joseph had been given the place of prominence in Egypt. He was kind of exalted to the second in command of Pharaoh. So he got put in that place right out of prison. He was able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, and he's now the number two guy in all the world. He's the you know the second in command under Pharaoh, but he's really kind of like in charge of everything. And Pharaoh doesn't even really know what's going on. He's just like, yeah, talk to Joseph, And so that's kind of where we left off. And we're coming to a point where at 42, where Jacob and his family, the rest of the brothers, they're back in Canaan, and there's a famine in the land. Remember, there were 7 years of good famine or good crops, and then there's going to be 7 years of just straight famine, and it's very severe. Where we pick up here is about 2 years into that famine, that second famine, or the bad part of the famine. I guess there's only one famine's bad in itself, so the second half of that, what's going on after the good years, then the second half, we're about 2 years into that. Joseph's now been in Egypt about 22 years. So he left when he was 17. He got sold into slavery when he was 17, and now he's been there, and he's about 39. So he's been there quite a while. Most of his life, more than half of his life, has been spent in Egypt. So we're going to see that he speaks Egyptian. He's very into the culture, and the brothers aren't even going to recognize him. They're not going to know who he is, but it's also been 22 years, so it's kind of hard to recognize somebody after that long. And that's kind of where we pick up. And we're going to pray, and then we'll read right through it. So, Father, thank you for your word. Thank you that we get to study it, Lord, and we get to be students of the word, Lord. As we look into this today, Lord, would you just speak to our hearts regarding specific issues, and I know you speak to each of us individually, Lord, through your Spirit. As we study, there may not even be things that we're touching on, but you're still speaking to us about. So help us to do that, Lord, to really be open to the moving of your Spirit, to be open to hearing from you, and to receiving what you have for us today. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. So let me make sure I started this again. I did. Okay. Last week, for some reason, about 20 minutes in, it just shut off. I don't know why. And then it just, I happened to look over, and I was like, oh, it's off, and started again. So I thought I never started it, but I don't know. It's just being weird. So, chapter 42. Are you ready? Because this is going to be a marathon right now. Okay. Chapter 42. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" So this is, remember, 2 years into the famine. This is going. It's severe. It's all the way in Canaan. So Egypt was right on the Nile. They had lush vegetation. They weren't like nomads or shepherds where they traveled to different spots to get fresh vegetation and everything. It was all there. They were just by the Nile, and they're happy and content to just stay there. Okay, but this is severe. It's going out from Egypt all over everywhere. There's no anything anywhere. They're struggling, and they're realizing, okay, we're there's nothing. But Egypt has some stuff still. Egypt has something still. So Jacob said to his sons, "Why are you looking at one another?" I don't know why they're like, are they hungry? And they're like eyeballing each other, like Tom and Jerry cartoon. One of them's turning into a drumstick or something, and like, why are you guys staring? Why are you looking at me like that? So he said, "Indeed, I've heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to a place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." So they're concerned. This is big. Like, if we don't get some food soon, we're going to die. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin. It's been 25 years since Joseph seen his little brother Benji, with his brothers. For he said, lest some calamity befall him. Don't you guys go, Benjamin stays here. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed. So it seems that they catch up with some caravan that's going to Israel or going to Egypt and cruise along with them. A lot of people went there to try to buy or get grain somehow. That was part of the design of what God had in store, that Joseph would be able to manage all that and keep all that grain, and that they would make it through the famine. So, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over all the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him. That sounds kind of familiar, right? That's something we should kind of point out. All the brothers now are between 40 and 60 years old at this point. So they're quite a bit older, and at one point, if you remember back in Genesis 37, that Joseph came to them and said, I had a dream. I had a dream that basically all of you were going to bow down to me. And they hated him for it, and they, wanted to kill him even more because of that dream. And I've heard a lot of people say that Joseph should have never said that dream to them. He should have kept it to himself. He wasn't using good wisdom. He wasn't using, he was being silly. I kind of disagree with that, because what would have happened if Joseph never told him this dream, and then they come and they bow down to him and they find out that this all took place and actually happened, and Joseph told him after, I should have told you that before so you would know that it was actually true. They would never have known that Joseph had that dream earlier on. They would have never known that this was a fulfillment of what God designed, a fulfillment of prophecy. They would have never known those things. Joseph needed to tell them that dream, I think. And I think that it was very important, because now they know that what God said actually came to pass, actually came to be. And know that prophecy was fulfilled in them going and bowing down to Joseph. And then they also know that this is correct. This is what God had in store. And Joseph as well, he can say, look, remember, 22 years ago, I had that dream. I told you that this was going to happen, and God had spoken to me. And you guys didn't believe me. Remember, they said, we'll see what comes of this dreamer. We'll see what happens. Yeah, right. And it's coming to pass. It's being fulfilled. So I think it's very important that Joseph told his brothers. And I think that if God's put something on your heart to tell somebody, whether it's an encouragement or what have you, that's important that you tell them. And we're to test things by the Word of God. We're to test things by the Spirit of God to know that it's true or not. And we don't take everything that everybody says at 100% thus saith the Lord kind of thing. I'd be careful to say it that way. Thus saith the Lord. I have a word, for you. But God does reveal things to us in a sense where He speaks to our hearts and puts an impression on us or what have you to say, hey, I feel like the Lord's telling me that you need to, do this, or you're struggling with this, and I want to pray for you, or whatever it is, One of the pastors I listened to said that one time after church, he was feeling like, man, the Lord really is telling me I need to go speak to that person, to tell them this week this week everything's going to be perfectly fine. The news that you're going to hear, it's going to work out, and you don't need to be afraid. And the next day, he didn't tell him. He's like, that's not you, that's just me. I'm not telling him. I'm not doing that. And the next day after, the people came and said, we just had our ultrasound, and the baby has spina bifida, I think it's called, right? It's where the spine's on the outside, I think. And they said, we're freaking out, and then he's like, well, the Lord actually told me yesterday that it's all going to be okay. And his point was, how much better would it have been if I had actually spoken to him in that moment? And then they got the news. And then they heard, but the Lord already spoke to us and said it's going to be okay. And the baby turned out fine. And the baby is healthy, and he said that everything was great. And the Lord wanted to encourage him and use him through that. But it's one of those things where, the beforehand would have been a bigger confirmation or more of a comfort. So just a little side note there to I think it was important that Joseph shared this with them. So they came and bowed down with their faces to the earth. So they're coming, and everybody who's coming in comes in and bows down to Joseph, and they're on their face. They're not really getting a good look at him. By this time, Joseph, in Egypt they would have had their heads shaved. They shaved all their hair off because there was a lot of lice problems for one, but also because it was just a cleanliness kind of thing. They wanted to stay clean, and so they had invented eye makeup and all kinds of makeup, and even the guys wore it. If you've ever seen the movies, they got the big old black swoops and all that, and lots of makeup, and he would have had probably white linen on with the big gold collar, and been royalty and standing there as royalty, and so it makes sense that they wouldn't have recognized him. So Joseph saw his brothers and he recognized them though, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. In Egyptian, we find out, because in verse 23 it says that he used an interpreter to speak to them. So he spoke roughly to them, it says, harshly, and they didn't get who it was. They didn't know who it was, but he noticed them. Okay, 10 guys. Okay, oh yeah, I know, you rascals, They probably haven't changed a whole lot. They've just aged a little. So then he said, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Verse 8. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them. So this is where this is bringing back to his memory, oh yeah, you guys, this is a fulfillment right now. You guys are bowing down before me, just like the Lord had said. And he said to them, you are spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my Lord, but your servants have come to buy food. So probably at this point he's wondering, everything's coming back. Everything's flooding back in. That 22 years of history and all that is probably weighing on him at this point, wondering, is Dad alive? Is Dad still okay? Is Benjamin okay? I see 10 brothers. Where's 11? Did they kill him? Did they do something to him that they did to me? What does Dad think happened to me? Because he doesn't know that. He got thrown in a pit and sold to slavery. He doesn't know what Dad thinks. Did they tell him what they did, or did they make up some story? And then it says, verse 11, the brothers answer, we are all one man's sons. We are honest men. That's a stretch. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. Well, he's kind of standing right in front of him, but at least he got some answers right there. The youngest is with our father. So, okay, Benji's still alive and Dad's still there. Okay, all right, well, let's find out more. Verse 14, but Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not leave this place, unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother. And you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh surely you are spies. So he put them all together in prison for 3 days. Maybe that was how long Joseph was in the pit. I don't know. I'm just going to put them in there for a couple days, see how they like it, I think Joseph's kind of freaking out here. You can imagine he's ruling everywhere, and people are coming from all over the world to come buy grain, and they're lining up, and he's interacting with each person that comes up, and he's selling stuff, and he's doing all this stuff, and there's just tons and tons of people coming constantly, and all of a sudden he looks up and he sees, those are my brothers. What would happen inside you? Just the emotions would go crazy. The memories of what happened, and the probably, everything just stirred up all at once. And he's coming up on the spot what to do. How do I got to make sure Benjamin's okay. I got to make sure Dad's okay. And he's, okay, you guys need to stay here. I'll let one of you go home, but you need to bring that brother of yours back. And he's trying to come up with an idea of what to do, and maybe seeking the Lord. Lord, give me wisdom on what to do right now. I don't know what to do. You know. So Joseph said to them the third day, so it seems like he changes his mind at this point. Do this and live. And he's speaking through an interpreter here. So he's like speaking in Egyptian, and the interpreter says what he just said. Do this and live, for I fear God. And the word he uses is Elohim, which is the triune, the word for the triune God. The 3 in 1. It's El is the word for God, Allah is the word for two, and Elohim is 3 or more. So when he refers to God and says the 3 or more God, the triune God, they might have had a clue at this point when the interpreter said, "Do this and live, for I fear." Zaphnath Paneah said, "Do this and live, for I fear Elohim." Like, whoa, you're not like every other Egyptian that has multitudes of gods. You fear the one true God. That might have, maybe, if they were really paying attention, might have like clued them in a little bit. I don't know. And then he says in verse 19, "If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house. But you go and carry for the famine of your houses and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified and you shall not die." So he says, okay, change my mind a little bit. I'll keep one of you. The rest can go home, and you bring all the stuff so you can live, and then bring back your brother to me. And they did so. Then they said to one another, "We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us." So they're 22 years later, and they're guilt-ridden still. They're struggling with this. They think that because of what they did, that this punishment has come upon them. Because of what happened, this is what's going on. Their guilt it's going to keep driving them. And we're going to see that it drives them to fear a lot of times. They're guilty, and it pushes them towards the idea that everything's against them, everything's wrong, everything, they're in a situation and it's going bad, it's because of this or because that happened or because this happened, and they're just driven and guilty. And Joseph is hearing this because he's hearing it in Hebrew. They're speaking to each other, and he's listening to them say this. "We are truly guilty concerning our brother. We saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear." We listened to him crying out, and we listened to him while we're sitting down to eat, and he's in anguish, and we didn't care. This is why this has come upon us. This is why we're struggling right now. This is why we're having the negative thing come upon us. They're going to say this kind of stuff a few times, that God's against them. They're going to say, God's against us because of this. God's doing this because we did wrong. God's breaking us because we were bad guys. And I think that's a common misconception in the church today, that if you did something wrong, then God's against you, and God's going to get you back, and God's going to, you did this, so therefore I'm going to punish you and beat you down because you were a bad guy when you were 15 years old, and so now it's coming back to get you, and I'm here to punish you. And I think that's a wrong idea of who God is. Are there consequences sometimes? Yes. Are there things that come upon us? Yes. Is there the idea of reaping and sowing? Yeah. But is God punishing us because of certain things that we've done in the past? I don't believe so, because his punishment was poured out on the cross. He might correct you. He might spank you. He might use some of these things to convict us and draw us back to him. But he's not condemning, and he's not punishing in that sense. Conviction draws us to the Lord. Condemnation pushes us away from the Lord. And they both don't feel good. They both don't feel good. But when we're convicted of the Lord and the Holy Spirit's convicting us, it draws us to him. When Satan's condemning us, it pushes us away from the Lord. So we need to be careful of that, thinking God's out to get me. he's punishing me because of this, or he's punishing me because of that. You know, he might be convicting you to turn back to him if you're in sin or something like that. But you know, but that punishment was taken upon Christ. You know, so but they're feeling guilty here. They're struggling, and Reuben answered them, saying, you know, I told you so. Didn't I speak to you, saying, don't sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And we see this happening with Joseph a lot here. He turned himself away from them and he wept. So Joseph hears this and it just breaks him down. And he just turns around and he's broken, he's weeping. Then he returned to them and talked to them, and he took Simon from them and bound him before their eyes. So he takes one brother, Simon, binds him up. Maybe he didn't take Reuben because Reuben was like saying this, I told you guys we shouldn't do this. And, okay, well, I'll take the next in line. Give me Simeon, from them and bound him before their eyes. And he's going to keep Simeon in jail, and he's going to send the brothers off. So Joseph gave command to fill their sacks with grain and to restore every man's money to his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. So he gives them what they purchased, and he also gives them the money back that they brought to purchase it with, and then he gives them extra so that they can have stuff while they travel. It's about a 250-mile journey back. So it's not like they're walking down the street to the market here. It's a long way. I mean, I don't know how fast you could travel 250 miles on foot, and maybe with a camel or something, but I don't know. I get winded going to the fridge. So, like, I don't think I'm making it 250 miles, you know? Like, that's a long journey, okay? So, that's far. And then back, 500-mile round trip if they were to come right back. So he gives them provision for the journey. So they have food to get back home with, food to last when they get there. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with grain and departed from there. Verse 27. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was in the mouth of the sack. So he said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us? I think God's against them here. What is God's plan for them here? We know the end of the story. They don't. We know that they didn't read chapter 43 and 44. We do. What is God's plan? God's plan is to bring them to Egypt. God's plan is to put them in a situation where they have to come to Egypt. And he's put Joseph in place. Remember, he brought a man, or he led a man before them to be ruler over Egypt, to bring them in. And his goal in doing this is to make a great nation, to preserve life, to save. I mean, that's what Christ does, right? He saves, right? He can't. I came not into the world to condemn the world, but to save, right? Not to come in and bring fear and with a sword and just start hacking away, but save, right? And that's his goal here, is to save them and to make them a great nation and to bring the Messiah through this line and to preserve life. But they think God's against us because they can't see that far out yet, and they don't know what's going to happen, right? That I think happens to us quite a bit. We get in a situation, we can't see past the situation, and we're going, what is going on? God's against me. God's out to get me. God's punishing me. Whatever it is, and God has something else in store. I want to mature you. I want to sanctify you. I want to make you into the image of my Son, and I need to bring you through this, and you need to trust me. And we're going, but God's against me. I can't do it. And we're struggling, and sometimes it's very hard. It's not easy to go through many of the things that we've gone through, or that we go through. But the idea is to whether we say God's against us or whether we trust him and let him lead us. That's kind of the perspective we need to have. Imagine these guys on their way home to go talk to Dad, and and their conversation or what they're thinking. What are we going to tell him? He wants us to bring back, little Benji. If we don't bring him back, we can't get more food. And oh man! And then we went there and we got all the food, but all of our money's here. They're going to think we're thieves. How can we ever go back there? Just this struggle that's going on in their minds. Then they went to Jacob their father, verse 29, in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man who is Lord over the land, so Joseph is the man they're talking about, spoke roughly to us. And he took us for spies of the country. He thought we were spies, and he was mean. But we said to him, we're honest men. I don't know if Jacob chuckled at this point. And we're not spies. We're 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, by this I know that I will know that you're honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your households and be gone. And your youngest brother to me, and I shall know that bring your youngest brother to me, and I shall know that you're not spies and that you're honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and then you may trade in the land. I'll let you have Simeon back. You bring your other son here, or your other brother here, then I'll let Simeon go, and I'll let you kind of get what you need at that point. Then I'll believe you. So then it happened, as they emptied their sacks, that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. Fear seems to be a big thing going on in these guys' lives. They get there, they're afraid. They see the money in their sack, they're afraid. All the guys realize they have all the money, they're all afraid, even Jacob. And Jacob their father said this to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more. He's already kind of written it off, like we're not getting Simeon back. And you want to take Benjamin? And here's the patriarch here, Jacob, the one who's Israel, governed by God. What does he say? All these things are against me. Everything's against me. God's out to get me. It's all against me. Jacob needs to trust the Lord here, right? And I think in some ways he's still wrestling. He's still struggling, right? So just because we have one encounter with the Lord and we kind of come out of that limping or whatever, and the Lord's working in our lives, doesn't mean that he's not going to keep wrestling or keep working on us. I mean, this is a lifelong process, right? It's a lifelong process where the Lord's going to be working in our lives. And I want to point out that right now when he's saying these things, probably at least the boys are there, but most likely all the grandkids are there, all the daughters are there, all the servants are there. It tells us later that 75 people went into Egypt, that he brought 75 people in. So how many of these 75 are sitting there watching him go, everything's against me, you guys, I can't believe it. Joseph's gone, Simeon's gone, and you want to take Benjamin away from me? God's against me, everything's terrible. Well, thanks, Jacob. Jacob's giving a bad example at this point, and I think we need to be cautious of that. Because we can get in those situations, and look, we all do it. We all struggle, and we all at times go, I can't do this anymore, I'm sick of it, I can't believe God's allowing this to happen, I'm done, and we all get to those points. But we have to be careful, because there's a lot of eyes watching us, especially little ones, and they need examples of how to trust the Lord. All you guys in the back over there, you guys need to know how to follow people and see, like, this guy trusts the Lord. I want to do that. I want to live by that example. I want to see my father, or my mother, or my grandpa, or my grandma trusting the Lord and going through life and not doubting everything that comes up. I think there's a lot of wishy-washiness in the world today, and a lot of a lot of kids struggling to look for that, and it's needed. So verse 37, after this, Reuben then spoke to his father, said, well, kill my 2 sons if I don't bring him back to you. And those boys are probably like, huh, what? Thanks, Dad. I don't think that's a good idea. Put him in my hands, and I'll bring him back to you. And I don't think he's meaning literally. He's just kind of saying the idea is like, trust me, I'll bring him back. But he said, my son, singular, shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he is left alone. If any calamity should befall him on the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. You know what? Simeon's on his own. You're not taking Benjamin. No way. Benjamin's the only one he's really concerned with at this point. You're not taking my son. You're not doing this. I'm not letting you go. So verse 1 of 43. Now the famine was severe in the land, and it came to pass when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt. So probably a year later. They probably got enough to last through the year. So Simeon's been in prison this whole time in Egypt. Probably got enough to last the year. Then their father said to them, go back and buy us a little food. So Simeon's been there the whole time. He's in prison. And now they're like, okay, we need some more food. All right, you boys, you need to go again. But Judah spoke to him, saying, look, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food. But if you don't send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother's with you. We already told you this, Dad. Okay? Listen. And Israel said, why did you deal so wrongly with me as to tell the man you had still another brother? Why did you even tell him you had a brother? What is wrong with you guys? You should have lied and said, no, it's just the 10 of us, But they said, the man asked us pointedly. He said, asked us about ourselves and our family, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? He said, do you guys have another brother? And is your dad okay? Another clue maybe there. And we told him, according to these words, like the way he spoke, we made us want to answer. Could we possibly have known that he would say, bring your brother? What do you mean, Dad? It's not our fault. Then Judah said to Israel, his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you and our little ones. Look, Dad, if we don't go, we're all going to die. Everybody. We have to go. You have to do this. And this is Judah speaking. And this is one of my favorite parts here. I myself will be surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. Judah steps up and doesn't say, you can have my kids, or we really need to do this. Judah steps in and says, I'll take his place. If that's the case, I'll bring him back. But if not, you put it on me. I'll be responsible for him. Judah's maybe changed a little bit here, starting to grow up a little bit. For if we had not lingered, surely by now we would have returned the second time. Look, we've talked so much, it could have been done already if we would have shut up and just gone, Come on, Dad. By this time we could have gone, come back, we'd still have food, we wouldn't be stressing about this. And their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. He's going to throw his Esau plan into action here. Take some of the best fruits of the land. I don't know what that would be in this famine. Also dried stuff, I guess. In your vessels, and carry them down for a present for the man. A little balm, a little honey, some spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. That's the best of the land at the moment. So his plan is, hey, take them, bring a little present, just like we did with Esau, send a few things ahead, grease the wheels or whatever, get them some nice stuff from Canaan, and then take double the money in your hand and take back in your hand the money that was returned. So the money that he gave back to you, bring that back and take double what you took last time and take that. So we're going to make sure. This is the plan. And perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also, arise, go back to the man, and may God Almighty, El Shaddai, he says, give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. And if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. If it happens, it happens. That's kind of like a little bit, I don't know, not trusting, I guess. So the men took that present, verse 15, and Benjamin, and they took double money. Now remember, Jacob's going to be at home this whole time. It's a 500-mile journey there and back, and however long they stay there in between. So Jacob doesn't know what's going to happen here. He's just sending them off and then sitting around waiting for them to return. And they took double money in their hand and arose and went down to Egypt. And they stood before Joseph. Joseph's not going to talk to them here yet, but he's just seeing them. They stood before Joseph, and when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, he hasn't seen him in 22 years, but he sees they brought him. Take these guys to my house. Slaughter an animal, make ready for these men, who will dine with me at noon. Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's home. So he sees them. He goes, okay, I got another plan. We're gonna have a dinner. Take them, bring them to my house, and his servant goes and does it. Now the men were afraid. There it is again. The brothers were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. I heard this. Shakespeare said, "Suspicion haunts the guilty mind." When you're guilty, everything's suspicious. Everything's worrisome. Like, what's going to happen? It's because of this, or it just. When there's guilt-ridden, it's always bringing about suspicion of everybody's motive or a situation or things like that. And these guys are afraid because they're being taken to Joseph's house. What's going to happen? And they said, it's because of the money. Oh, it's because of the money that was in our sacks. It was returned the first time, and that this is why we're brought in, so that he may make a case against us and he seize us and take us as slaves and our donkeys. Kind of worried about the donkeys, I guess. So, verse 19, when they drew near to the servant at Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door of the house. So they get close and they see the servant, and they're going to try and get ahead of it here. Hey, sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, but it happened when we came to the encampment that when we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back in our hand. And we have brought back other money in our hands to buy food. We don't know who put the money in our sacks. I don't know what was going on. We just showed up. It was there. We didn't take it. Please believe us, And the servant says this to them, verse 23. But he said, peace. He says, shalom. Shalom be. Peace be with you. Don't be afraid. They didn't tell him they were afraid, but he sees it. You guys are afraid. It's okay. Peace, shalom. For your God, and he uses the word Elohim, your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. I don't know what Simeon was saying, but probably like, where in the world have you guys been for the past year and a half? Like, what are you doing? So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, gave their donkeys feed. So he brings them in, he's washing their feet, he's giving them, care, he's taking care of the donkeys. They were worried about the donkeys being slaves, but they're getting food and they're taken care of. And then they made the present ready for Joseph coming at noon. So they got their little gift wrap out, and they put all the figs and pistachios and whatever in there. They made a little bouquet and got it ready for Joseph. For they heard that they would eat bread there. And when Joseph came, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house and bowed down before him to the earth. So they bring the present, they're on their faces again. Then Joseph asked them about their well-being and said, is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? So these guys are down on their face, and Joseph's going, how are you guys? Are you guys okay? Is your dad alive? Is he okay? Is he still okay? And their face on the ground, and they answered, Your servant, our father is in good health. He's still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. So they're on the ground, and he's asking them how dad is, and they kind of go, yeah, he's okay. Back down on the ground, they're still afraid. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother, the one of whom you spoke? He hasn't seen him in 22 years. This is the brother of it. Him and Benjamin are of the same mother, and so he's very special to him. Is this the one you spoke? And he got close, or he said to Benjamin, God be gracious to you, my son. Now in his heart he yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. He says, God be gracious to you. And then he just breaks and he turns around and goes so he can go weep and go get it out there. And he went into his chamber and he wept there. And then he washed his face because his makeup was running. And he came out and he restrained himself and said, okay, now serve the bread. So they set him a place by himself and them by themselves. So Joseph's on his own spot, and the brothers are all by themselves, because it says the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, or the Haburai is where we get the word Hebrew from. It means shepherds or nomads, right? Because it was kind of an abomination, it says. For that was an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him. This is very interesting. The firstborn, according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. So he sets the table and he puts, Reuben, Simeon, and Judah, or Levi, Judah, all the way down. He puts them all in order perfectly. It sets the table for them all to sit according to their age and birth. This is to get this by chance. It's about a 40 million to 1 shot. So this is pretty astonishing. So that it says there that the men looked in astonishment at one another. They were looking around going, how did this just happen? And they're sat perfectly by age, by birth, Then he took, that would have been another clue for them. Then he took servings to them from before him. But Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as theirs. So I think Joseph's saying, I wonder if they're going to hate him because he's favored. Let's see how their hearts are now. I'm going to give him 5 times the amount and see how they respond to that. He's favored right now in front of me. Let's see what happens. And they didn't act out. They didn't go, whoop, why does he get more? And start causing a ruckus, It's also known that in different cultures, giving certain portions was a sign of respect or showing that this person's like a prince. And in Egypt, the 5-portion thing was the sign, this one's like a prince. It's put before him. So he's doing this with Benjamin to kind of exalt him and see how the brothers react. But it says they drank and were merry with them. It literally says they drank well and were merry. And they had fun. Maybe, yeah, and it would have been beer, which is weird because the Egyptians were famous for brewmasters and they had beer instead of wine. So it would have been warm and gross. But that's what they were celebrating. And it says they were merry with him. Maybe this is the first time he's ever sat there and listened to them, and they talked to him or to each other, and he watched them and what they said and how they spoke, how they interacted, and they don't realize that he can hear them, He's still listening to them. Oh boy, okay, I'm trying. We'll see how far we get. I won't torture you guys too long. We got 6 more chapters to go. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. Also put my silver cup. This would have been like kind of a well-known thing, a special cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest and his grain money. So put this silver cup, my special cup, in Benjamin's sack, and fill their sacks back up with money, and then send them off. And so he did, according to the word that Joseph spoke. Verse 3 of 44. As soon as the morning dawned, the men were sent away, that they and their donkeys. When they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off, Joseph said to his servant, get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? So when you find them, go, get them, and say, why have you repaid evil for good? I took care of you, didn't I? And you're going to act wickedly like this? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks, and with which he has indeed practiced divination? You have done evil in so doing. So he overtook them and spoke them these same words, and they said to him, why does my Lord say these words? Far be it from us that your servants should do such a thing. So they're like, what? What do you mean we didn't do anything? Look, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks. How then could we steal silver or gold from our Lord's house? I mean, we returned the money from earlier, like, we wouldn't steal, like we brought back the money that was put back anyway, And then they give this thing, with whomever of your servants it's found, let him die, and we will also be with my Lord's slaves. Oops. And he said, Now also let it be according to your words. He's like, okay, we'll see how that goes. He whom with it is found shall be my slave, and you guys shall be blameless. Whoever is found with, be my slave. The rest of you are free to go. Then each man speedily let down his sack to the ground, and each one opened his sack. So he searched, and he began with the oldest, again, and he left off with the youngest. So he went in birth order again here. That's another clue. And I think what Joseph's wanting to see here is how are they going to respond? When they find it, when Benjamin's taken and he's going to be grabbed, how are they going to react? Are they going to be like, well, that sucks. See ya. Dad's sure going to be mad, but we'll survive, And how are they going to respond? Are they going to go, good, little favored one? Can't. Good, he's out of our hair again, just like Joseph, or whatever. And he left off with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes. Here's their response. They were broken. And each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. They didn't run. They got up and they went to the city. So Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there. And they fell before him on the ground, and Joseph said to them, what deed is this that you've done? And he's in Egyptian still, remember? He's still going through translator. Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination? Didn't you know that I can see these things ahead of time? I knew what you did. He's trying to catch him here. And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. I think he's giving a little confession here of what's going on. Here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and he also whom the cup was found. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. And as for you, go up in peace to your father. Then Judah came near to him and said, oh my Lord, please let your servant speak. And this is where we get an amazing picture of Christ here in Judah's life. Let me speak a word into your Lord's hearing. Do not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even like Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servants, he's going to kind of recount what happened here. My Lord asked his servants, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age who is young. His brother is dead. Speaking of Joseph, right there standing in front of him. So he maybe realizes dad thinks I'm dead at least. And he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. That's how they see Benjamin and Jacob. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. But you said to your servants, unless your younger brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. So it was when we went up to your servant my father, that we told him the words of my Lord. And our father said, go back and buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down. But we may not see the man's face unless our younger brother is with us. Then your servant said to my father, this is Judah speaking. Then your servant my father said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. He's speaking about what Jacob said, And the one went out for me. And I said, surely he is torn in pieces. So this is the first time Joseph hears what dad thinks happened to him. Jacob said, my wife bore me 2 sons, one went out for me, and I said, surely he's torn to pieces. So Joseph's now hearing for the first time what dad thinks happened to him. So dad, he realizes, has thought I was dead this whole time. And I have not seen him since. But if you take this one also from me, and calamity befalls him, you shall bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. If something happens to Benjamin, that's it. I won't make it. So therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, it will happen when he sees that the lad is not with me, that he will die. So your servants will bring down the gray hair of your servant, our father, with sorrow to the grave. And here's what Judah says about himself. For your servant, me, I became surety for the lad to my father, saying, if I don't bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before your father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord. Let me take the place. Let me take his spot. Judah saying, please, please, you can't keep Benjamin. You have to send him back. Take me instead. I will take his place. That's the picture of Christ we have right there. There's a consequence, a punishment, a difficulty that's happening here, and Judah steps in and says, me, I'll take his spot. I think Judah's grown up quite a bit since what happened before in chapter 38, right? And what happened when he came up with the idea to get rid of Joseph. And now he's giving his life for his brother. Rather than wanting to take the life of his brother, he's giving up his life for his brother. It's pretty big change. I will take his spot. I'll take the blame. Put it on me. Put whatever you have, whatever consequence, put it on me, but let him go free. He's being a substitution for him. He's being the one in the place. It's pretty amazing. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? I can't do this. I can't go back without him. You take me and you let him go. And a couple verses here, because we're not going to make it, I don't think. Sorry. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him. He's convinced now. Joseph's like, okay, they're not out to kill Benjamin. They've changed. There's something different about them. He's convinced, and he couldn't restrain himself anymore. He couldn't hold it in anymore. Imagine all of what's going on in Joseph's emotions and heart, and he's got this little ruse going on where they don't know it's him, and he's speaking in Egyptian, and he's just full of all this emotion, and he just can't handle it anymore. And it says that, but he couldn't restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he just cried out in Egyptian, "Make everyone go out from me! Get out of here!" And imagine Judah. He's like pouring out his heart before him, and then Joseph just screams in Egyptian, "Oh," like, "Whoa, boy, what did I just say?" Oh, I'm in trouble. But he screamed, "Get out of here, everybody out." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Everybody left, and it's just Joseph and the brothers. And Joseph wept aloud again. He just broke down. It just came out. And the Egyptian and all the house of Pharaoh heard it. I mean, he's bawling. This is coming out. And Joseph said to his brothers now this is the first time he speaks in Hebrew to his brothers, and he says, "I am Joseph." Can you imagine their reaction? And just all of a sudden, he's screaming, everybody's running out of the room, and they're standing there like, "Oh boy!" And he looks at him and goes, "It's me, Joseph."
Say what?
Yeah. Wow. Come again? And then what does he say? "Does my father still live? Are you sure? I really want to make sure. Is Dad still alive?" And his brothers could not answer him. Makes sense? For they were dismayed in his presence. They were terrified. They were troubled. Right? And then it's pretty amazing, because at another point, they'll be revealing to brothers of someone who they didn't recognize. In Zechariah, just point this out really quick because I think it's really cool. In Zechariah, verse 9 of chapter 12, it says, "It shall be in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem, and I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication, and they will look on me whom they have pierced." At one point, there's going to be a realization that, we had it wrong. There'll be a revelation or revealing to the brothers of who they didn't recognize. And the same way here, they didn't recognize him, but he revealed himself to them. "It's me. Oh, we didn't know. What did we say?" Like, "Oh man, did we say anything, Brad?" You know, they're troubled, they're terrified, they're freaking out because of this. And Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." Were they afraid? Were they scared to walk up to him? And they came up to him, and he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold to Egypt. But now, do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For," this is pretty amazing, "for God sent me before you to preserve life." How do we get to that point when something like this has happened to us? It's not you guys. Don't be worried. Don't be upset. God did it. God brought me here. And he brought me here to preserve life. It was part of his plan. That's, after a 23-year trial, that's amazing. He's forgiven them, it seems, in his heart. He's not holding on to bitterness and anger and wanting to get back at them. I mean, he had every ability to do that. He could just say, "You know what, you guys, you're out of here. Yeah. See how you like being in a pit, crying out, you know, and enact some vengeance here." How did he get to this point? I think Joseph came to a point where he had to say, "Lord, you let this happen. You brought me here." He had to wrestle with God in that sense, rather than wrestling with all the what if, or how come, or why did they do this, or why did they do that, and he came to a point where he said, "God did this. God allowed this to happen," and he kind of turned from looking at his circumstances, immediate, brothers, his dad, Egypt, Potiphar's wife, the prison, all this stuff. He started looking up instead of at the things around him. And he started, at some point, communing with the Lord about why. Why, Lord? Why did you let this happen? Why is this going on? This is you. You're doing it. You've done this. You've allowed it. It's a pretty hard place to get to, I think. But I think the only way to do it is wrestling and dealing with those hard things having to do with why God has allowed it. We might not get an answer for why, but we can find comfort in the fact that it was in the Lord's plan or design, or he allowed it to happen. And God's grace and mercy is going to be shown here, and oh man. Okay, 3 more verses. "For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting." So look, it's been 2 years, he says, and there's going to be 5 more, guys. "And God sent me before you." Here's the amazing thing too. "God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you on the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance." God did this. God put me here. God sent me ahead of time. You didn't do it. It was the Lord. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. You guys, it wasn't by your hand. God allowed it to happen. God brought me here. "And he's made me a father to Pharaoh, the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt." So Joseph's then put in this place where he's now in charge of everything. He's ruling everything, and he's come to a point in his life where he can forgive them and not hold on to all that bitterness and anger, and know that it's God in control rather than the circumstances that his brothers put him in. That's a pretty amazing place to be. And I don't want to take too much longer here, but I think there's a lot of times where we struggle with things and not knowing why God has done something or allowed something, or we blame others for our situation. Well, it was my whatever, my work, or my dad, or and there's legitimate reasons for a lot of things, right? We struggle with a lot of things. We have a lot of issues and scenarios where there's difficulties, but maybe God's using that to strengthen our character, to lead us into a sanctification, a more sanctified life, to mold us into the image of his Son, and we're in that process. And some of these things we're going to go through James, and it talks about a lot of trials and difficulties, and that when they come upon you, not if, when they come upon you, they're not electives. They're mandatory courses. These are things that have to happen in our lives. Like if you exercise, if you go to the gym, you're breaking down muscle in order to build muscle. You're working on things to strengthen things. You're working hard. You're going through difficulty in order to grow. If you don't, it atrophies. It doesn't work. It doesn't grow. So in the same way, it's kind of like that spiritual exercise for us to go through difficult things and to have that to strengthen, to grow. And they're not fun. James says some hard stuff too. Count it all joy. Like, what? I don't like this book already. James, I don't like you. No, there's difficulty that we go through, but we can come out in the same place that Joseph did, of not holding on to bitterness or anger or frustration, but we can forgive. And we can trust in the Lord and know that His hand is working, and that we are in His will, in His plan for what's going on, and let Him lead us. I think a great psalm, Psalm 23. 23. He leads us through difficulty. He leads us through green pasture. He leads us to still water. He's leading us through all those difficult things, and the sheep aren't afraid when the shepherd's there. And I like this. The shepherd's not concerned with the sheep's worries, so to speak. They might be worried about a lot of stuff, but he's leading them. He knows where he's going. He's taking them right where they're supposed to be. And they might go, but I don't think this is the right way. I don't know. This is difficult. It's dark over there. It's scary. And he's going, no, right here. I got you. I have heard that it said that he leads them to still waters because if the water's running at all, the sheep freak out and they'll run because of the noise and the movement, and they panic. And so he leads them right to the spot where it's, okay, this spot's still, you can relax, come down, drink some water, And so he knows what he's doing. The Lord knows exactly what He's doing. He's not stressed out, worrying like, oh man, that wasn't supposed to happen. Gabriel, you're supposed to be watching him. But we panic like that sometimes, right? We go, what's going on, Lord? I can't believe. Are you sure? Are you still with me? And we kind of get that worrisome, fearful mentality. And maybe there is some guilt there from things that we've done, and that needs to be handled with the Lord. It needs to be confessed to Him and dealt with, right? Because that guilt will it ate these guys alive for 22 years, 23 years. And what happened when they came together and they celebrated and He was revealed to them, and then everything's, it's okay. This was God's plan. 23 years of me being guilty and lying to Dad, and now they got to go back and tell Dad, we kind of lied to you, and Joseph's okay. Did they ever tell Benjamin? Did Benjamin not even know, and he believed what Dad believed? There's just so much there that can drag us down and cause difficulties. So, all right, let's pray. God, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for being able to study together, Lord. And if we're struggling with guilt or things like that, Lord, I pray that we just bring it to you, that you do that work in us where we wrestle on the vertical, Lord, with you rather than with our situation or people here, Lord. And I know there's a lot of us that have gone through quite a bit of not knowing why, Lord, or understanding things, but you're not out to get us. You're not out trying to find a way to punish us or beat us down in some, sadistic kind of way. But you love us, and you gave your Son to take our place, to be the substitute, Lord. And we thank you. We love you. We want to glorify you in all that we do. We want to honor you with our lives. So help us to do that, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Really quick, I forgot to mention on the back, there's 2 papers. One's are like doctrines, and then the like what we believe, and then the other is like style of ministry, or like how we do ministry. So if you're interested in that, you can grab those. There's a couple back there, and check that out and read it for yourself if you like. So other than that, love you guys. Have a good week. Stay cool. Don't melt. It's supposed to be above 90 all week, so good luck. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. 90 is better than 109. That's 20. Almost 20-degree difference. I like the